Okay, my name is Gwen Utz. I'll be doing commentary for today. Norristown is hosting Upper Merion for a high school meet. We are now doing warm-ups. Everybody's allowed to get one entry or dive off of the boards before we start. And shortly we will be starting the actual meet. In a diving meet, the girls will be going first. Every girl will do one dive, their first dive, and then all of the guys will do their first dive, and then we'll start over. That is the conclusion of one round. Norristown will be starting, and their first diver is Amanda. She's doing a front dive in the tuck position. That means she brings her knees up and holds them there. Amanda, this is her first meet that she's actually in for high school, and she's scores are 4, 4, 4. That was good for Amanda. She went over a lot, which is why she got 4s. But 4s are still a pretty good score for Amanda. Upper Merion is next. She did a front dive straight position. As you see, she did not tuck or pike. She was completely straight. It is a harder degree of difficulty. She also got 4, 4, and 4 for scores. Norristown is next, also doing a front dive, which is required for today. Kelly got 4, 4, and 4. Kelly also went over with her feet, which is why she got 4s. Kimi, who is a Norristown diver, is up next, doing a front dive. Kimi's scores are 6.5, 5, and a 5. Kimi didn't go over as much. She got higher than the other girls that have gone. That is why she got higher scores. And she held her legs nice and tight together as she went in. She went over, which is why she didn't get all 6, 6.5s. The start of the first round for the guys. Upper Merion did a front dive layout or straight. They're the same thing. He got 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. He got higher than the other girls who were getting 4s, and that's why he got slightly higher, as in 4.5s. Next up is Danny from Norristown. Danny did a front 1.5 pike. He did not do a front dive, which is required, but front 1.5 pike you can replace with the dive. Did 6, 6.5, 6 for his scores. Next up is Upper Merion. He did a front dive. His entry was very nice, and his scores are 5.5, 5, 6. Upper Merion, or Norristown is up next. His name is Luke. He's going to be doing a front 1.5 also instead of a front dive, which is 1.5 somersaults so that you land head first, as you'll see. That was in tuck position, and he got a very nice entry. His scores are 6.5, 6.5, 6. Upper Merion is up next, and he is also doing a front 1.5. He got nice height as his legs went over a little bit, so he'll probably get a little lower. His scores are 5, 5, and 5. This is the beginning of the next round. There will be 6 rounds for every meet. Amanda for Norristown is up. She did a front somersault in the tuck position. She didn't spin that fast, so she made a crash landing as you saw. We'll see what the judges give her. And it's 2, 2, and 2. She got 2s because she didn't make it all the way around, but she did complete the dive. Next up is Upper Merion, doing a front somersault. As you can see, she came out of that one nice and straight with her toes pointed and feet together. So she got 5, 4.5, and 5.5. Kelly is up next, and she's doing a front 1.5 tuck for Norristown. Kelly went in nice and straight with her toes pointed together, which is good. Front 1.5s are harder. Her scores were 6, 5, and 5.5. Kimi for Norristown is up next. Kimi did a front 1.5 pike. Her legs went over a little bit, and her scores are 5.5, 5, and 4.5. Each dive is given a degree of difficulty, which is how hard the dive is. A pike is generally harder than a tuck, and a layout is harder than a pike. So doing a 1.5 tuck would give you less points for the same score as doing a 1.5 pike. Next up is Upper Merion. Upper Merion got 5.5, 5.5, 5. He did a front 1.5 tuck. He got nice height, but he was out to about 5.5, 6 feet when you're supposed to be 3 feet away, and that's why his scores were what they were. Danny for Norristown is up next. Danny just did a double tuck. That is 2 somersaults in the tuck position. His scores were 4.5, 4, 5. Double is a lot harder than a 1.5, so its degree of difficulty is higher. Next up is Upper Merion. He did a 1.5 in Pike, and his scores were 3, 2.5, and 3. His feet just barely made it all the way around, which is why he got such low scores. But his hands made it in first, which is why he didn't fail the dive. Luke for Norristown is up next. Luke just did a double pike. It's just harder than a double tuck. And his scores are 5.5, 5, and 6. Those are good scores, and they'll give him very high points in this meet. Next up is Upper Merion. Luke's toes were pointed and together, which is one of the reasons he got such high scores. And he made it in straight. Upper Merion did a inward dive pike. He touched his toes, which is very nice, and he came in straight. His scores are 5.5, 5.5, and 5.5. We are starting the next round with Amanda from Norristown. Amanda just did a back dive. She flipped her legs over, which is going to give her lower scores, which are 2, 2, and 2. Next up is Upper Merion. The delay was in mix-up of the number. Each dives have a specific number that goes with them. And to make sure that every dive is the exact dive that they want to do, the number has to match. She just did a front dive with a half twist. Her scores are 2.5, 2, 2.5. She flipped her legs over, which is why she got 2s. But otherwise, her legs were nice and together. Kelly for Norristown is next. She's also doing a front dive with a half twist. Kelly left her legs back so they're not vertical like you're supposed to when you go in the pool. So she Her scores are 4, 2.5, 3.5. A little better than the girls before her. Kimi from Norristown is up next. She is also doing a front dive with a half twist. Kimi is a senior this year, and this is her first time diving for the high school team, although she dove earlier in her career. Kimi's dive was much higher with a nice straight entry. She got 7, 6, and 6. Those are very good scores, especially in a high school meet. She did a good job of getting it in nice and straight. Boys are up next, Upper Merion. He just did a back dive layout. That was good. He was back a little farther than 3 feet, which is what he's supposed to be, but he got 4.5, 4, and 4, which is pretty good. Danny for Norristown is up next. He's doing a front dive half twist. Danny came in straight. His toes weren't as pointed as Kimi's were. So he gets 6.5, 6.5, 6. That's a good score for Danny. He arches back a little bit to get it into the water, but it did not affect his scores. Next up is Upper Merion. He did a back somersault in the layout position. Very nice. He got 6, 4, and 5.5. He came in a nice straight, but he didn't really stop his rotation, which is why one gave him a 4, and the other one gave him a 6 for keeping nice and straight throughout the entire dive. Luke is up next for Norristown. Luke is doing a front 1.5 somersaults with 1 full twist. And he did it very nicely. He got it into the water for 5.5, 6.5, 6. Those are very good scores for him, and that was a nice dive. Next up is Upper Merion. He did a back 1.5 somersaults in the tucked position. His scores were 4.5, 5, 5. He came out of it in an arch position with his legs bent, which is why he didn't get as good scores as he could have gotten. He could have gotten 6s. You were supposed to come out of that completely straight. Next up is Amanda at the beginning of the next round for Norristown. Amanda just did a back somersault pike. She got 4.5, 5, and 5, which is her best dive yet. She did it very nicely. She stayed in position and she came in straight. Next up is Upper Merion, who is doing a inward dive in the tucked position. She did that very nicely. She went back instead of up as much, so the scores won't be 6s. And her toes weren't pronated. 5, 5, 4.5. But other than that, it was a very nice dive, and that's what the scores are showing us. Kelly for Norristown is up next. She'll be doing a back dive in the layout position. Kelly went in the water at a very not vertical angle, almost horizontal angle. 4, 4, and 4 were her scores, which is why she got 4s. Kimi for Norristown is up next. And for the sake of the divers, I'm not talking during the actual dive. Kimi did a back dive, which is one of her best dives. There's her 1.5. She got 7, 6, and 6.5, which is very good for Kimi. A back dive is relatively easy on the degree of difficulty scale, but to do it nicely is harder than it might look. Upper Merion is up next. He did an inward dive in the tucked position. As you can see, he jumped off backwards, but he went toward the board, which is why it's called inward. His scores are 5.5, 5, and 5.5. He got nice height, but he pushed back, and that's why he got 5s instead of 6s. Danny for Norristown is up next. He did a reverse dive with 1 somersault in tucked position. As you can see, he went off forwards and then did a back somersault, which is why they call it a reverse. His scores were 5, 6, and 5. Upper Merion is up next. He did a front dive with a half twist for a score of 5.5, 5, and 4.5. Luke for Norristown is up next. He is doing a back dive in the layout position. He get in with almost no splash, so he's going to get a good score of 6.5, 5.5, 6.5. Upper Merion is up next. He did a reverse dive with 1.5 somersaults. He landed 5.5, 6 feet out. And his scores were 4, 4, and 4. You're supposed to land about 3 feet in. He leaned off the board, which is why I pushed him out so far. And that's why he also got 4s instead of 5 or 6s. He also popped out an arch instead of straight. We're beginning our next round with Amanda from Norristown. She did an inward dive tuck. And her scores are 4.5, 4, and 4.5. Next up is Sammy for Upper Merion. She did a back dive in the layout position. Her entry was not vertical, but it was nice and straight. So she got 3.5, 4.5, and 4.5. Kelly is up next for Norristown. She did a back somersault in the tuck position, and she got 4, 4.5, and 4.5. Kimi is up next for Norristown. Kimi did a inward dive with 1.5 somersaults. That degree of difficulty is pretty high, up there with a double. She got 4.5, 5, and 4.5. That is one of the harder dives that she does. It takes a lot of spin and rotation to get that in, and as you see, her legs didn't get all the way up to where they're supposed to be. Next up is Upper Merion, beginning of the guys. Did a reverse somersault in the tuck position. He got nice height, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5. But he popped out of that late, which means that he wasn't completely straight on entering the water. He was popping out while entering the water, which is not preferred. Danny for Norristown is up next. Danny did a back dive in the layout position. When you put your hands up to the side, that is called a set. You're supposed to do that in any dive. You got 5.5, 6, and 5.5. His toes are pointed in together, and he made a little splash, which is why he got those scores. Upper Merion is up next. He did a reverse somersault in the tuck position. His scores are 4.5, 5, and 5. Did not get as much height, and there was more motion, more movement, which is why he didn't get as good scores as the last diver. Luke from Norristown is up next. Luke did an inward 1.5 in the tuck position. His leg went over a little bit, but other than that, he held them tight. His scores were 5.5, 5, and 5.5. Upper Merion is up next, and he's also doing a inward 1.5 in the tuck position. He made it nicely without much of a splash. He never came out. 4.5, 5, and 4 were his scores. The reason they were lower than Luke's dive was because he was out farther away from the board. And as I said, he didn't get all the way out of the dive to make a nice straight entry, though he didn't get much splash because he saved the dive. Amanda for Norristown is up next. Amanda did a front dive with a half twist. Her legs were apart, which they're supposed to be together, so that will take off some points from her score. 3.5, 4.5, and 3.5. This is the last round of diving, and Sammy is up for Upper Merion. She just did a back somersault in the tuck position. She over-rotated and landed on her back, so that will hurt her scores, which are 2.5, 4, and 4. One guy thought that she went over too much, which is why she gave 2.5. The other two obviously thought that she did a nice job in getting her body out straight, which is why she got 4s. Kelly is up next for Norristown. Kelly did an inward somersault in the tuck position. Her scores are 4.5, 4, and 4. She just barely made the dive, which is why she got 4.5, but she came out just in time, so she didn't land in a tuck position. Kimi Kimi is up next for Norristown, and the number again did not match what the written thing said, so they're fixing that. Kimi is doing a back somersault with a full twist. That was a new dive for Kimi. And she didn't quite make it all the way around, and they're deciding on whether or not that she made it around enough to score it. The ref says score it. And they get 4, 2.5, and 4. The one lady gave her a 2.5 because she thinks that she basically failed the dive because she didn't get all the way around. So she gave her a 2.5. Well, the other two looked at how good she did her twist and the somersault, and that's why she got a 4. Upper Merion is up next for the guys. He did an inward somersault in the tuck position. His feet were pointed during the somersault, but made it in nicely. His scores were 5, 4.5, and 5. Danny for Norristown is up next. Danny did an inward dive with 1.5 somersaults in the tuck position, which is a new dive for him. He got 4, 4, and 4, which is very good for the first time doing that dive in a meet. He didn't come out as nicely as he could because his legs didn't come all the way up, which is why I got 4s. Upper Merion is up next. Up Merion just did an inward dive with 1 somersault in the tuck position. He pushed back a bit, which is why he got 4.5, 4, and 4.5 for his scores. Luke for Norristown is up next. He is also doing a new twister dive for him. Luke just did 2 1.5 somersaults with 1.5 twists. His scores were 5.5, 5, and 4.5. He went over a little bit on his twist and a little bit on his entry, which is why I got the 4.5, while the other two gave him higher scores of 5. Upper Merion is up next. He just did a 2.5 in the tuck position. His height was very nice, and he got a nice spin, so he got out of it. His scores were 5.5, 5.5, and 5. He did not pop with a nice strong entry, which is why I only got 5.5 instead of the 6s or 7s that we were seeing earlier in the meet. That is our last dive for the meet, and that concludes it.
And now the final results for the diving competition versus Upper Merion. In girls, Kimi Detweiler took first place, Kelly Cooney took second place, and Amanda Osmacher took fourth place. For boys, Luke Stem took first place. In boys swimming, there were a number of great finishes for the meet for the Eagles. David Grodzik took first place in both the 200 free and 500 free. Scott Whitley placed second in the 200 IM and 100 breaststroke. Jeremiah Delaney earned second in the 50 free and 100 back, while Shane Franzone got second in the 100 butterfly. Thanks for watching, and tune in for more coverage of the NASD diving team. Good night.